Okay, these particular items that I remember most distinctly about the Edinburgh year was Sue and I decided we would each follow our musical interest, but in our different way. Usually we went every place together. We ate a big breakfast so we wouldn't have to buy lunch, which was very hard for me. Sometimes I would cheat, hope Sue wouldn't see me because she would be unhappy, and buy a little sausage roll at lunchtime. But mostly we didn't eat, and then we'd come back to our digs for supper. So we did everything, and we had 2 of our 3 classes together, as I said. We vowed to avoid Americans, of which there were many, which we did successfully. We hung out with a lot of British kids, and I had a particular German friend I liked who helped me apply for positions in German hospitals the summer after Edinburgh. That was wonderful. I really should have gone, but my dad had a complete fit over it. And by the end of the year, your father had proposed after 2 dates.
Yeah.
He later told Cousin Janie, by the way, that I spoke 7 languages.
Yeah.
To which I replied to Janie, and she said, "That's why we're all so suspicious of you." It's Cousin Janie from Clintonville. Anyways, it was very sweet. And I said, "Well, I don't. I have studied German, French, and Latin." I think he really wanted me to type for him, which I hate doing, and I don't do very well. So after that, she felt sorry for me and was very nice to me. So anyway, so Sue and I had a few things that we wanted to do on our own. I joined the Edinburgh Bach Choir, which the choir director this year, the Chicago choir that just had a concert, that director, he didn't know my director, but he's very familiar with the Edinburgh Bach Choir. And we had a long conversation in a car trip about the Bach tradition that Edinburgh follows. This particular guy was just a sensational director. And we sang lots of cantatas. For my audition, he had me sight read an aria out of one of the cantatas, which was a great moment. I wasn't nervous, so I sight read it without flaw, and that made him very happy. So I was one of a group of 8 who sometimes got to do solos for the choir. The Bach choir was one of the more significant parts of my year. We practiced long and hard, once a week, sometimes twice a week. And Christmas, he invited us to one of the houses on the high. I could go to it right now. I don't remember the address, though. Up on the 3rd floor, it was one of those tall 16th century buildings that was still intact, although going up the stairs I wasn't sure. Huge, wonderful grand piano. We sang our way through the Oxford Carol book that night with all of these fantastic singers. It was it's Edinburgh, it's going to be dark in December, very dark. Snowy evening, just perfect, magical. And I think we had plum pudding, but I really didn't need to. We were just drunk on the beauty of the music we were singing. I made very good friends in that choir. 2 of the guys I formed a madrigal with, so it was Sue and me and Chris and Dougie. Chris was the tenor, and he hung out with Sue, and Dougie was the bass, who was of nefarious character, so I avoided him as a plague. Your father was furiously jealous of Dougie, although he only met him once. Toward the end of the year, our quartet had a performance in the Unitarian Church. But I don't think your father had even proposed yet, but he was just very jealous of this guy. He was a good-looking guy, beautiful voice. not my type of man. I like the tall, thin, athletic, moody types. Clearly. Anyway. Well, I generally didn't, but when your father came along, I thought he was very appealing.
Was Dougie Scottish?
He was. Dougie and Chris were both. No, Dougie was Scottish with a pronounced accent that you would adore.
And he wasn't Doogie?
Doogie. He was Doogie, but we called him Dougie.
Okay.
Chris was from England. He was an Anglicized Scot. So, of whom there were many at Edinburgh. In some cases, they had applied in Oxford or Cambridge or elsewhere and didn't get in, although I wouldn't swear to that. Our best friends in the house of the 11 people I mentioned before, which didn't include Chris or Doogie, were Rosemary and Vicky, who lived just below us. They were both English also. And I'm still in touch with Rosemary, and so is Sue. They're the ones who live in Devon on the coast. Okay. Well, so Bach choir was my most beloved experience, probably, although we went to concerts, Sue and I, all the time. Sue, by the way, sang with the Gilbert and Sullivan troupe. They did the Mikado, and she was one of the 3 little schoolgirls. Yeah, her father was a big Gilbert and Sullivan fan, and so I used to spend a lot of time at their house. He was a chem professor at Allegheny, and a wonderful pianist. So he'd always sit down to the piano and play Gilbert and Sullivan. That's how I got interested in that music. So that was her special thing. We heard Yehudi Menuhin play, and I figured out that Dad, whom I didn't know at that time, was in the audience as well. Yeah. Probably were lots of other places too. Sue and I spent at least once a week at the art gallery, partly for our art history class, but partly just because we loved it. Yeah, we saw every site and visited everybody we possibly could. Got to know a lot of people. We, most of all, although we avoided Americans, got to know Jan and Ray Shepherdson, who are such a big part in our lives. They went to the Unitarian Church. They invited us over for supper. I learned to cook from her. They had a little baby. Sue and I were entrusted with his care one day and discovered they had predictably not left any diapers. So we used all their tea towels, and yeah, they were gone. Gosh, they probably weren't gone more than 4 hours, but it was kind of a nightmare. Neither one of us had ever babysat. Yeah.
Did you go through Oxford and Cambridge that year while you were there?
No. Yes. I didn't go to Oxford. Dad did. He bought stationery and wrote me on it.
Yeah.
And became fascinated with Oxford. No, Sue and I did go to Cambridge. I'd almost forgotten. We visited St. John's and met a quite fetching young undergrad who took us all over. I remember the backs. I remember how beautiful the river was and how intelligent he was. I remember the chapel, of course, King's. Yeah, we walked all over. We spent a day there. How did we get there? We must have been on our way to London, possibly. How far would it be from Edinburgh to Cambridge?
Oh, I would guess you would have gone through London.
Yeah. You know, I did keep a little diary. I've got it upstairs. We visited Eton.
Oh.
I know. In the early months that we were in England. Westminster, of course. We spent a lot of time there when we were in London. Windsor. Yeah.
Well, you would have seen it all before they tore everything down and put up all the 60s buildings in Edinburgh and Cambridge and London.
Oh,
Must
yes.
have been interesting.
Yeah, we did. And in one of those files that you copied, I mean, Sue and I took a lot of photos. I had a great camera that my dad and mother bought me for my high school graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, my brother borrowed it and said, someone stole it out of his locker at the Navy.
Yeah.
I never had a camera again. Until I bought one for Sarah and me about 15 years ago. But Sue and I had virtually the same photos, so
Yeah.
that's why I copied quite a few off of her rolls.
Mm.
She had her dad's fantastic professional camera,
Mm-hmm.
which unfortunately got soaking wet when we were dumped into the water at Capri. Did you ever go there?
No.
It's a grotto,
Mm-hmm.
and you get in the boat with two handsome rowers, and as you're going, you have to bend down to get through the entrance to the grotto.
Yeah.
They misjudged,
No.
and we went down.
Wow.
So they would lie on their passengers and scoot through,
Yeah.
and there you're in this blue grotto, which is sensational.
Mm.
Well, we were in there finally, but we were soaking wet. So Sue's camera was the only casualty. I'm trying to think. I must have had my camera. Maybe I left mine at the hotel because we had hers.
Yeah. But she saved her film.
No, I think we lost all that film.
Yeah.
And she had to leave the camera. We were on our way to Naples, or maybe we were at Naples visiting friends of her family. So we had to leave it there, and then it was shipped back to Edinburgh later. Rather expensive proposition. It's a gorgeous camera.
Well, we can look through those photos later. You can narrate
Okay.
them if you want.
I don't know if I've squeezed everything I wanted to say out of Edinburgh. It was mostly the content. It wasn't looking at pretty things, although I was very into architecture and of course, doing British history and art. It was just every person I touched at the university had this wealth of knowledge and curiosities that I found most fetching. And because we were American, but we weren't gaudy, noisy ones, I think we had access to a lot of the feelings that Scots and English had toward America, their own country, Europe, the war, etc. Just quite amazing. Okay. Yeah, let's stop there for now.